You know, there's a particular kind of silence that fills a house after a door has been slammed. It's not a peaceful silence. It's a heavy, thick thing, a presence all its own that seems to suck the warmth right out of the walls. I was standing in the middle of my own kitchen, the echo of that slam still vibrating in my bones, and all I could hear was the frantic thumping of my own heart. My daughter, my Chloe, my only child, had just looked at me with a fire in her eyes I'd never seen before, her voice dripping with a contempt that felt like a physical blow. "You just don't get it, Mom. You never have. You're so stuck, so judgmental. I can't even breathe around you anymore." And then she was gone. The door frame still seemed to be trembling. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, a shaky, ragged thing. My hand went to the cool granite of the countertop, just to steady myself. Stuck. Judgmental. The words circled in my head like vultures. Is that what she saw when she looked at me? After everything? I looked around my kitchen, this place that had been the warm, beating heart of our home for so long, the place where I'd baked her birthday cakes, where we'd decorated 1,000 cookies, where she'd done her homework at this very counter while I chopped vegetables for dinner. Now it just felt like a museum of a life that was slipping through my fingers. It all started over something so silly, so trivial, which is always the way, isn't it? The big explosions are almost never about the big things. They're about the last straw. She'd come over for our usual Wednesday dinner, a tradition we'd kept since she moved out 3 years ago. I could tell she was distracted the moment she walked in. Her hugs were quick, her phone was practically grafted to her hand, and her eyes had a faraway look I'd come to recognize. We were making the salad together, something we'd done 1,000 times, and I asked her about the trip. She and her boyfriend Mark were planning a 2-week backpacking tour through Europe. It sounded chaotic and unstructured to me, sleeping in hostels, riding overnight trains. My old practical mind immediately went to the dangers, the what-ifs. "Are you sure that's safe, honey?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, neutral. 2 young women traipsing around with all your belongings on your backs?
She'd stopped chopping the cucumber. "Mom, first of all, it's not the 1800s. Secondly, it's Mark and I, not 2 young women. And we're 26, not 16. We'll be fine." I know, I'd said, the words coming out before I could stop them. "It's just hostels. I've heard stories. And all that money you've saved, wouldn't it be nicer to stay in proper hotels? See the sights comfortably?" That's when she put the knife down. The clink of it on the counter was unnaturally loud. "Nicer? More comfortable? Mom, that's not the point. The point is the experience, the adventure. Not everything has to be wrapped in bubble wrap and sanitized for your protection." My cheeks grew warm. "I'm not trying to sanitize anything, Chloe. I'm your mother. It's my job to worry about you, to want what's best for you. And you think you always know what's best?" Her voice was low, but it had an edge to it now, a sharpness that could cut. "This is my life, my adventure, not yours. You had yours. You got married at 22, had me at 24, and you've been in this same house, in this same town, doing the same things ever since. And that's fine, for you. But I don't want that. I don't want your life." Each word was a little pinprick, 1,000 tiny betrayals. I don't want your life. The life I had built for her. The life I had poured my soul into. The safe, stable, loving life I thought was my greatest gift to her. She made it sound like a prison sentence. I must have looked stricken because her expression softened for just a second. But then it hardened again, even more than before. "Look, Mom, I love you, but I can't keep doing this. I can't keep having every single one of my choices questioned and critiqued. My job isn't good enough. My apartment isn't nice enough. Mark isn't, well, you've never said it, but I know you think he's not good enough either because he doesn't have some corporate 9-to-5 career. I feel like I'm constantly auditioning for your approval, and I'm tired. I'm so tired." Tears were welling in my eyes now, hot and shameful. I do approve of you, Chloe. I see you struggling sometimes, and my instinct is to help, to guide. By telling me how to live, she shot back. That's not guidance, Mom. That's control. You're so afraid of me making a mistake, of me getting hurt, that you're smothering me. You're so stuck in your own ways in this perfect little world you've built that you can't even see me, the real me. You see a version of me you wish I was. And that's when she said it. The words that I knew would be etched behind my eyelids for a long, long time. You just don't get it, Mom. You never have. You're so stuck, so judgmental. I can't even breathe around you anymore. She grabbed her purse from the back of the chair, her movements sharp and final. I need a break. From this. From all of it. And then, the slam. The silence rushed in. I stood there for I don't know how long, just staring at the space where she had been. My little girl. The one I used to rock to sleep, whose skinned knees I kissed, whose tears I wiped away. I had spent 26 years trying to be a good mother, to protect her, to provide for her, to love her. And in her eyes, all I had done was build a cage. I was the warden of her life, not the guardian. The thought was so devastating, so utterly shattering, that my legs felt weak. I stumbled to a chair and sank into it, the weight of her words pressing down on me until I felt I might break in two. This wasn't a simple argument. This felt like an ending.
And in a way, it was. The days that followed were a strange, hollow echo of the life I'd known. The Wednesday after the fight came and went, the clock ticking past 6, then 7, then 8 o'clock, with no ring of the doorbell, no sound of her key in the lock. I'd made a pot roast, her favorite, the way my own mother had taught me, with all the little carrots and potatoes she loved so much. The smell of it, which usually filled the house with such a sense of anticipation and comfort, now just seemed to mock me. I sat at the table alone, the expanse of empty wood stretching out in front of me, and I picked at my food, each bite tasting like sawdust. I ended up wrapping it all up, every last bit, and I walked to the freezer in a kind of trance, my movements automatic. I opened the frosty door, the cold air hitting my warm face, and I placed the container of pot roast right on top of the other one, the one from last week, the one I'd made for her, that she'd never come to eat. I stared at the two identical white containers, stacked one on top of the other like a monument to my failure, and a sob finally broke free from my chest, a raw, ugly sound in the quiet kitchen. This was my new routine. Cooking for a ghost. My phone was a special kind of torture. I'd pick it up a dozen times an hour, my thumb hovering over her name in my contacts. I'd type out a message, "I'm sorry," or "I miss you," or "Please, can we talk?" And then I'd delete it. Every letter feeling like a surrender of my own hurt, or worse, another attempt at control. She wanted space. She had asked for it so clearly. The most loving thing I could do, the hardest thing I had ever had to learn, was to give it to her. So I sat in the silence. I wandered through the rooms of my house, seeing her everywhere, the faint pencil marks on the doorframe charting her growth from a giggling 5-year-old to a serious teenager, the small chip in the living room baseboard from the time she'd tried to move the sofa all by herself to redecorate. This house wasn't just a building. It was the scrapbook of our life together, and now I was trapped inside it, alone with all the memories. It was during one of these aimless wanderings, about a week after our fight, that I found myself in front of the one place I'd been avoiding, the basement door. I hadn't been down there in years. It was just a place for storage now, a graveyard for old holiday decorations and my husband's forgotten tools. Robert. God, I missed him in that moment with a physical ache. He would have known what to say to Chloe. He had always been the bridge between us, the calm to my storm, the one who could make her laugh when I had made her cry. He'd squeeze my shoulder and say, "Just give her time, Ellen. She's got your fire, that's all." He'd been gone 5 years,
felled by a heart attack as swift and silent as a thief in the night. And the emptiness he left behind was a canyon I'd learned to walk around, but never to cross. Now, without him, the chasm between Chloe and me felt wider and deeper than ever. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob and walked down the creaky wooden steps into the cool, dusty air below. The single bare bulb cast long, dancing shadows. There were boxes labeled Xmas and baby clothes and Robert's books. My heart clenched. I wasn't ready for his books, but my eyes were drawn to a different box. Tucked away under the stairs, its cardboard softened with age and moisture. It had Ellen Old scrawled on the side in my mother's elegant handwriting. I dragged it out into the dim light, the dust motes swirling around me like confused fireflies. I didn't even know what was in it. My mother had given it to me years ago, before she passed, and I'd just shoved it down here, too busy with the present to bother with the past. Now, the past was all I had. I sat on the cold concrete floor, the chill seeping through my jeans, and I lifted the cardboard flaps. And I found her. I found me.
It was like opening a time capsule, but not of my whole life, just of one specific, pivotal part of it. On top was a stack of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was my own, from my early 20s. The loops and curls, so much more dramatic and hopeful. They were letters I'd written to my mother. I'd forgotten all about them. I untied the ribbon, the silk feeling fragile in my hands, and I pulled out the first one. The paper was thin, the ink a little smudged. "Dear Mom," it began, "I've done it. I've really done it. I've packed 2 suitcases and my typewriter, and I'm getting on a train tomorrow. New York City. I can barely sleep. I'm so excited and terrified all at once. I know you and Dad think this is a mistake, that I should finish my teaching degree, that it's too dangerous, but I have to try. I have to see if I can make it as a writer. Please try to understand." My breath caught in my throat. I could feel the ghost of that young woman's heartbeat, thrumming with a wild, desperate energy. I read another. "Mom, the city is incredible. It's loud and dirty and magnificent. I got a job as a waitress to pay the rent on this tiny apartment that has a fire escape I use as a balcony. I'm writing every night. It's hard. It's so much harder than I thought. Some days I'm so lonely I could cry, but then I'll see something. A man playing a saxophone on the corner for no one, the way the light hits the buildings at sunset, and I feel so alive I could burst." The words were a mirror reflecting a version of myself I hadn't thought about in decades. The girl who craved adventure, the girl who wasn't afraid of being uncomfortable, the girl who took risks. I kept reading, my heart sinking lower with each letter. "Mom, I met someone. His name is David. He's a photographer. He's passionate and messy, and he sees the world in a way that takes my breath away. We're talking about traveling together. Maybe to Europe, just a backpack and a camera each. I know you want me to be safe, to be sensible, but this feels like living for the first time in my life." Europe. With a backpack. The parallel was so stark, so painful, it was like a physical blow. I was Chloe. I was my own daughter, full of fire and dreams, writing home to a mother who I knew was worried, who I feared was judgmental. And then the letters changed. The tone grew darker, the script more hurried. "Mom, it's over with David. It was all a mess. A beautiful, terrible mess. He was not who I thought he was. I'm heartbroken, and I'm so embarrassed. I feel so foolish for believing him, for following him. I spent all my savings on this trip that never happened. I feel so lost." The next one was the last one. "Mom, I'm coming home. I can't make it here. The writing isn't working. The city has chewed me up and spit me out. I'm tired. I just want to come home. I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you." Tears were streaming down my face now, dripping onto the old paper, smudging the ink of my own youthful despair. I had forgotten this. I had packed this version of myself away in this box and buried her in the basement. I had taken that humiliated, heartbroken girl and I had carefully, methodically built a new life for her, a safe life, a sensible one. I went back, finished my teaching degree, met the kind, stable Robert, got married, had a baby, bought a house in my hometown. I built a fortress of stability, brick by careful brick, to ensure I would never feel that lost, that foolish, that vulnerable ever again. And in doing so, I had become the very thing my younger self had been running from. I had become my own mother. The realization was a tidal wave, washing over me and leaving me gasping on the shore of my own understanding. I wasn't trying to control Chloe because I thought I knew better. I was trying to protect her. I was trying to build a bubble around her so she would never have to feel the shattering humiliation I felt reading that last letter. I was trying to spare her the pain of a David, the failure of a dream, the desperate loneliness of a city that doesn't care if you live or die. My worry, my constant suggestions, my desire for her to have a safer, more comfortable path, it wasn't about judgment. It was about terror, a deep, primal mother's terror born from my own scars. But in my desperate attempt to keep her from falling, I hadn't realized I was clipping her wings. I was treating her life as a minefield to be navigated, not a landscape to be explored. I was so busy pointing out the potential dangers that I was missing the glorious, breathtaking view. I sat on that cold basement floor for a long time. The letters scattered around me like fallen leaves, the dust of my own forgotten history settling on my skin. The ache of Chloe's absence was still there, a constant, dull throb in my chest, but it was different now. It was no longer mixed with a defensive, self-righteous hurt. Now it was layered with a profound, gut-wrenching regret. I had been so focused on the mother I thought I should be, the protector, the guide, the wise voice of experience, that I had failed to be the mother she actually needed. She didn't need a guardian to warn her of every pothole in the road. She needed a co-pilot who would trust her to drive, even if it meant they sometimes took a wrong turn. She needed me to believe in her resilience, not just fear her fragility. I carefully gathered the letters, my hands trembling. They weren't just relics of a failed adventure. They were proof that I had survived. The heartbreak with David hadn't killed me, the financial struggle hadn't broken me, the professional failure hadn't defined me. They had shaped me. They had led me to Robert, to Chloe, to this very house. The messy, painful, unpredictable path had led me home. And it was a good home. It was a life filled with love, even with its share of quiet grief. But I had never given Chloe the chance to have her own path, her own mess, her own journey that would inevitably lead her to her own version of home. I had been trying to hand her the destination without letting her experience the trip. I carried the box upstairs, the weight of it feeling different now, not like a burden, but like a key. I placed it on the kitchen table, right where her plate used to be. I knew I couldn't call her. Not yet. An apology over the phone, a text message, it wouldn't be enough. It would just be more words, and we'd had enough of those. I needed to show her. I needed to speak a language she would understand. But how? How do you bridge a chasm that you spent a lifetime digging with your own two hands, all the while thinking you were building a foundation? The answer came to me later that evening as I was mechanically putting away the dishes. My eyes fell on the freezer. The 2 containers of uneaten pot roast were still in there, a frozen testament to our separation. And then I looked at the box of letters on the table, and a thought, fragile and tentative, began to form. It was a risk. It was vulnerable. It was the complete opposite of the safe, controlled responses I was used to giving. It meant handing her a piece of my own brokenness and trusting her with it. The old fear, the one that had dictated so much of my parenting, rose up in me like a wave. What if she doesn't care? What if she sees it as weakness? What if it's not enough? But for the first time, I pushed that fear down. I had to have faith in her. The same fierce, unshakable faith I'd had when I'd held her as a newborn and promised her the world. I had to show her that I saw her, not as an extension of myself, but as her own, whole, capable person. And the only way to do that was to finally let her see me. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat at the table with a pen and a fresh piece of paper. Not a letter to be sent, but a plan to be enacted. It wasn't about explaining myself or justifying my actions. It was about an offering. It was about dismantling the wall between us, brick by painful brick, and hoping that on the other side, she would still be there, waiting. The next morning, I woke up with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. It was terrifying. It felt like I was that 22-year-old girl again, packing her suitcases for a city she didn't know, her heart full of equal parts terror and hope. But this time, the destination wasn't New York. It was my daughter. The plan was simple, but its execution required every ounce of courage I possessed. I started by taking the 2 containers of pot roast out of the freezer. I didn't throw them away. Instead, I let them thaw on the counter, and I watched them, this congealed, tangible evidence of our rift. And I knew they were the first thing that had to go. I emptied them into the garbage, the rich gravy and soft meat landing in the bin with a final, dull thud. It felt symbolic, a small act of letting go. I washed the containers until they shone, and I put them away. Not with sadness, but with a quiet determination to fill them with something new, something we could share if she came back to this table. Then I went to the store. I didn't buy ingredients for a carefully planned, nutritionally balanced meal. I walked right past the roasts and the bags of potatoes. I went to the baking aisle. I bought flour, sugar, butter, and a bag of chocolate chips. The kind she loved when she was little. The cheap, melty ones. Not the fancy, dark chocolate I'd started buying because it was better. I came home, cleared the kitchen counter, and I began to bake. I didn't follow a new, complicated recipe. I pulled out the old, stained index card on which my mother had written her chocolate chip cookie recipe in her looping script. The one Chloe and I had made together 100 times, standing on a chair next to me, her small face serious with concentration as she dropped messy spoonfuls of dough onto the cookie sheet. The house, which had been so silent for weeks, began to fill with the warm, buttery, sweet scent of memory. It was the smell of happiness. It was the smell of us, before things got complicated. While the cookies cooled, I went back to the box. I didn't take all the letters. I took just 3. The first one, bursting with excitement about New York, the one about meeting David and the dream of Europe, and the last one, the one drenched in heartbreak and failure. I didn't include a note of my own. I didn't explain them. I just paperclipped them together and placed them in a simple, plain envelope. The words themselves had to do the work. My story had to speak for itself. Then I packed a box. Not a big one, a small cardboard box. I lined the bottom with a clean kitchen towel, and I filled it with still warm cookies, their chocolate chips glistening. I placed the envelope of letters carefully on top of them. This was it. My message in a bottle. My white flag. It was saying, I see your adventure, and I remember my own. I see your passion, and I remember how it felt. I see your fear of failure, and I want you to know that I failed too, and I survived. I see you, Chloe. For the first time in a long time, I really see you. I drove to her apartment, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every traffic light felt like a verdict. What if she was home? What if she slammed the door in my face? What if she took the box and threw it away, unopened? I parked across the street from her building. my heart hammering against my ribs. I could see the light on in her window, the one that looked out from her small kitchen. I saw a shadow move past. She was home. For a long, terrible moment, I couldn't move. The old me, the one who was so afraid of getting it wrong, begged me to just drive away, to keep the peace, to avoid another rejection. But the new me, the one who had read those letters and remembered what it was like to be young and desperate to be understood, took a deep, shuddering breath, grabbed the box, and got out of the car. I didn't go to her door. I couldn't. This couldn't feel like a confrontation. I walked quietly up the path to her building's entrance and placed the box squarely on her welcome mat. I didn't ring the bell. I just turned and walked away, my legs feeling like jelly. I got back into my car and I drove away, not looking back. I had thrown my stone into the pond. Now I had to wait for the ripples, not knowing if they would ever reach the shore. The waiting was its own special kind of agony. The first hour was the worst. I sat in my living room, my phone on the coffee table, staring at it as if I could will it to ring through sheer force of hope. Every minute that ticked by felt like a small defeat. Maybe she'd found a box and just tossed it. Maybe she'd read the letters and thought I was being manipulative, trying to make her feel sorry for me. Maybe the cookies were stale. 1,000 maybes, each one more torturous than the last, swarmed in my head like angry bees. I had done the most vulnerable thing I could possibly do. I had handed my daughter the blueprint of my own youthful failures, and the silence that followed was deafening. The days stretched on, long and empty. I tried to read, but the words blurred on the page. I tried to watch television, but the sounds and images were just noise. My entire being was focused on that silent phone. By late afternoon, a heavy, leaden feeling had settled in my stomach. It hadn't worked. I had misjudged the situation, misjudged her, misjudged everything. The hope that had felt so bright and daring that morning was now guttering out, leaving behind the cold ashes of despair. I was just about to give up, to retreat into the familiar numbness, when I heard it. A car door, slamming outside. Not the gentle click of a neighbor's, but a firm, decisive sound. My heart leapt into my throat. I didn't move from the sofa. I just held my breath, listening. Then, the sound of a key in the lock. My front door opening. It had been so long since I'd heard that sound. She didn't call out, she just walked in. I heard her footsteps in the hallway, hesitant at first, then more sure. And then she was standing in the doorway to the living room. My Chloe. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale and streaked with the ghost of tears. In her hand, she held the envelope with the letters. She looked at me, and for a long moment, we just stared at each other across the room, the space between us filled with all the unsaid things, all the hurt, all the love that had gotten so tangled up.
She took a step forward, her voice a hoarse whisper. "You went to New York?" That was the first thing she said, not, "I'm sorry," or "Why didn't you tell me?" but a question about me, about my story. I nodded, my own throat too tight for words. I did. A long time ago. She took another step into the room, her eyes searching my face as if seeing me for the first time. "You wanted to be a writer? You lived in a tiny apartment and worked as a waitress?" The disbelief in her voice wasn't judgmental. It was wonder. It was as if I had just told her I'd been an astronaut. "I did," whispered. "It was the bravest thing I ever did. And the most terrifying." Her chin trembled. "And this David? The trip to Europe?" "It fell apart," I said simply, the old ache a distant echo now. "It fell apart, and I fell apart with it. I came home. I licked my wounds. and I built a life that felt safe. The word hung in the air between us. Safe. It was the word she had thrown at me, the word I had worn as a badge of honor and a shield. Now she understood where it came from. It didn't come from a place of superiority. It came from a place of scar tissue. She looked down at the letters in her hand, then back at me, her eyes swimming with tears. You never told me any of this. All my life, I thought this was all you ever were. This, she gestured vaguely, at the house, at me. This stable, perfect mom who had everything figured out from day one. I thought you couldn't possibly understand what it felt like to have a dream that felt too big or a heart that felt too broken. I thought I was so different from you. A sob broke from my chest. Oh, Chloe, you are so much like me, it takes my breath away. And that was what I was so afraid of. I saw my own fire in you, and all I could think about was how much it can burn you. I was so busy trying to be a fire blanket that I forgot fire is also warmth and light and life. She was crying openly now, silent tears streaming down her face. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and sat down on the sofa next to me. Not touching me, but close. So close I could feel the warmth from her skin. She placed the letters on the coffee table next to my silent phone. She looked down at the letters in her hand, then back at me, her eyes swimming with tears. I read them, she said, her voice thick. I read about you being lonely and alive and heartbroken, and I ate the cookies. They tasted like home. She finally turned to look at me, her eyes full of raw, unguarded emotion I hadn't seen in years. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. Not like that. I was just so frustrated. I felt so unseen. I reached out then, my hand trembling, and I covered hers with mine. Her fingers were cold. I'm the one who's sorry, my darling girl. I'm sorry for not seeing the brave, capable woman you've become. I'm sorry for listening to answer instead of listening to understand. You have every right to your own adventure, your own mistakes, your own story. And I promise you I will be here, not to point out the potholes, but to help you out of them if you fall, and to cheer for you with every single step you take.
And then she leaned into me. She rested her head on my shoulder, just like she did when she was a little girl, after a nightmare or a scraped knee. The weight of her, the solid, real warmth of my daughter leaning on me again, broke open a dam inside my chest. I wrapped my arms around her and held on, and we cried together. We cried for the lost time, for the harsh words, for the misunderstandings that had piled up like a wall between us. But we were also crying with a kind of relief, a profound, bone-deep relief that the wall was finally coming down. We sat there for a long time, not speaking, just holding each other in the quiet twilight of the living room, the ghosts of my past and the hope for her future finally making peace in that simple, healing embrace. Eventually, she pulled away, sniffling and wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so childlike it made my heart ache. So, she said, her voice still watery but with a hint of a smile playing on her lips, a writer, huh? All those times you corrected my book reports, it all makes sense now. She was teasing me, gently, and the sound of it was the most beautiful music I had heard in weeks. I laughed, a wet, shaky sound. Let's just say I learned the hard way that having a passion doesn't always pay the rent, but it taught me how to see the world, and it taught me how to tell a story. I looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the curiosity in her eyes. Would you like to know more about it? About all of it? She nodded, tucking her feet up underneath her on the sofa, getting comfortable. Yes, I really would. So I told her. I told her about the tiny apartment with the fire escape, about the smell of coffee and old books in the diner where I worked, about the thrill of seeing my name in a tiny literary magazine that paid me $10. I told her about David, not with bitterness, but with the sad wisdom of hindsight, how his passion was real, but his foundation was sand. I told her about the crushing loneliness, the days I was so broke I lived on packets of oatmeal, and the specific, sharp shame of having to call my parents and ask for a bus ticket home. She listened, her eyes wide, taking it all in. She didn't interrupt. She just let me talk, and in the telling, the memories lost their power to hurt me. They just became stories, my stories, and I was sharing them with my daughter. When I finished, the room was dark, and I felt lighter than I had in decades, as if I had been carrying that box of letters inside my soul all this time and had finally set it down. "It's funny," she said softly, after a long moment of silence. "Hearing all that, it doesn't make me think less of you, Mom. It makes me proud of you. You were so brave." "Brave and foolish," I said with a wry smile. "The two often go hand in hand." "That's what I'm counting on," she replied, and her smile finally reached her eyes. She took a deep breath. "Mark and we leave for Amsterdam in 3 weeks. The flights are booked, the hostels are reserved." My old instincts prickled, the automatic list of worries rising to the surface. Are they safe? Do they have good locks? What if you get sick? But I caught them. I didn't let them out. I took a breath of my own and I smiled back at her, a real, genuine smile that felt unfamiliar on my face. "That sounds amazing, Chloe, truly. I want to hear all about your itinerary. Will you send me pictures? Lots of them?" The relief that washed over her face was so profound, it was almost painful to witness. It told me just how much my approval, my simple, genuine interest meant to her. "Really?" she whispered. "Really," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "I want to see it all through your eyes, the good, the bad, and the messy." I squeezed her hand. "And when you get home, you can tell me all about it, over pot roast." She laughed, a real, free laugh that filled the room and chased away the last of the heavy silence. "Deal." She looked around, as if seeing the house anew. "It's good to be home, Mom." "It's good to have you home, my love." And in that moment, I knew that no matter where she went in the world, no matter what adventure she had or what mistakes she made, this would always be her home. Not because of the walls or the roof, but because I was finally ready to be the home she could always return to without judgment, without condition, just love. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind, but a beautiful, joyful one. It was like the air itself had changed in our relationship. It was clearer, easier to breathe. Chloe came over often, sometimes with Mark in tow, and we would spread maps and printouts across the kitchen table. But this time, it was different. I wasn't the critic on the sidelines. I was the enthusiastic audience. "Tell me about this hostel," I'd say, and she'd light up, explaining how it was in a converted windmill just outside the city and how they had to take a bicycle to get there. I'd feel that old familiar clutch of fear. A bicycle in a foreign country. But I'd swallow it and say, how wonderfully adventurous. And the amazing thing was, after a while, I started to mean it. I began to see the trip through her eyes, not as a series of potential disasters, but as a tapestry of experiences waiting to be woven. She brought her backpack over one evening, a bulky, technical thing that looked like it could survive a fall from a cliff. "Okay, Mom, the great pack," she announced, heaving it onto the floor. "I need to do a test run. Help me decide what stays and what goes." We spent hours on the living room floor, surrounded by piles of clothes, a first aid kit the size of a small suitcase, a water purifier, and a dozen packets of instant noodles. It was chaotic and silly and wonderful. I held up a ridiculously fluffy sweater. "This is going to take up half your pack, honey." "But it's so cozy," she protested, and we both laughed. It was in those moments, surrounded by the mundane debris of preparation, that I felt our new relationship truly taking root. We were no longer mother and daughter in the old, strained way. We were becoming friends, confidants. I told her more little stories from my time in New York as we folded and refolded shirts, and she told me about her hopes for the trip, her slight nervousness about traveling with Mark for so long, her secret dream to maybe write a travel blog about it all. A writer, just like her mom, I thought, my heart swelling with a pride so fierce it brought tears to my eyes. The day of their departure arrived, a bright, crisp morning that felt full of possibility. I drove them to the airport. I didn't cry, though I wanted to. I hugged Mark tightly and told him to take care of her, and then I turned to Chloe. I held her face in my hands, just for a second, memorizing the feel of her skin, the bright, excited light in her eyes. "I am so proud of the woman you are," I whispered. "Go have the time of your life, and call me when you can." "I will, Mom. I love you. I love you more." I watched them walk through the automatic doors, her backpack towering over her slight frame, their hands linked until they disappeared into the crowd. The silence in the car on the drive home was different this time. It wasn't empty. It was full of anticipation. She was gone, but she wasn't lost. She was just on her adventure. And I had my own work to do. I had to learn how to be the mother of an adventurer. I had to learn how to wait for postcards and grainy photos sent over shaky Wi-Fi. I had to trust that the foundation we had rebuilt in those 3 weeks was strong enough to hold across an ocean. When I got home, the house felt different. It didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like a base camp. I went straight to the freezer and took out the ingredients for a chicken casserole, a practical, freezer-friendly meal, not a symbolic pot roast. I was moving forward. As I was chopping vegetables, my phone buzzed. A photo. It was a blurry, slightly prucked picture of Chloe and Mark, their faces squished together, making silly faces with an airport terminal in the background. The caption read, "Boarding now. Love you." I smiled, my vision blurring with happy tears, and I propped the phone up on the counter so I could see it while I cooked. This was our new normal, and it was more than enough. The weeks that followed were a lesson in a new kind of patience. It wasn't the desperate, aching weight of our silence. It was an active, hopeful anticipation. My phone became a portal to another world. The pictures started trickling in. First, a stunning, sun-drenched shot of the canals in Amsterdam. The water like liquid glass, the narrow houses standing tall and proud like a row of colorful storybooks. Then, a slightly chaotic, energetic picture from a bustling Berlin street food market, Chloe holding up what looked like a monstrously large currywurst, her face a comical mix of delight and apprehension. The photos weren't always perfect. Some were blurry, some were dark, but each one was a treasure. They were her eyes, showing me her world. She'd send little snippets of text with them. "The bike ride to the windmill was worth it, Mom, even though I fell into a ditch. Don't worry, just my pride was hurt." Or, "This museum was incredible, made me think of you and Dad." She was including me not out of obligation, but because she wanted to. I found myself waking up each morning with a little thrill, wondering what part of the world would light up my screen that day. I printed a map of Europe and pinned it to the corkboard in the kitchen, marking their route with little colored pins. Robert would have loved this. He would have been right there with me, tracing their journey with his finger, his voice full of excitement. I could almost feel him standing behind me, his hand on my shoulder, smiling. I started doing things for myself, too. I signed up for a pottery class at the community center, something I'd always thought about but never made time for. My first few attempts were lopsided, messy disasters, but I didn't care. It felt good to be a beginner again, to be learning, to be creating something with my own hands that wasn't a meal or a clean house. One evening, about a month into their trip, my phone buzzed with a video call. My heart did its little flip. It was Chloe. I fumbled to answer, smoothing down my hair. Her face filled the screen, glowing and a little sun-kissed, with the most magnificent, ancient-looking stone archway behind her.
Mom! Hi! Her voice was bright, but I could see a hint of something else in her eyes. Tiredness, maybe? Where are you? I asked, my face breaking into a wide smile. Prague! It's magical, Mom. You wouldn't believe it. The architecture, it's like a fairy tale. She panned the camera around to show me the square, the astrological clock, the sea of people. Then she turned the camera back to herself, and her smile wavered just a bit. It's also a lot. We've been moving so fast. I think we're both a little worn out.
The old me would have pounced. I told you so, it's too much, come home. But the new me just listened. I could see it in her face. Not regret, but the honest fatigue of a long journey. That sounds completely normal, sweetheart, I said, my voice calm and steady. Adventure is exhausting. Where's Mark? Her expression softened. He's getting us some pastries. He's been a rock, honestly. But we had a little spat this morning over which museum to see first. It was stupid. She let out a small, weary laugh. I guess we're not perfect travel companions after all. I smiled. Nobody is, honey. The important thing isn't avoiding the arguments. It's how you find your way back to each other after them. It's about knowing that being tired and grumpy with someone doesn't mean you don't love them. It just means you're human. I paused, thinking of my own arguments with Robert, how they always ended in laughter and a shared cup of tea. Maybe you two need a down day. Find a quiet park. Just sit. Don't see a single sight. Just be. She looked at me, her eyes wide with what looked like surprise and gratitude. That actually sounds perfect. Thank you, Mom. In that moment, I wasn't just giving her permission to be tired, I was giving her the wisdom that comes from a life lived. I was no longer the enemy of her experience, I was a guide who had been on a different, but no less challenging path. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing and everything, and when we hung up, I felt a deep, solid sense of peace. She was out there, living her messy, beautiful, imperfect life, and I was here, not as a worried spectator, but as a steady anchor. And that was exactly where I was supposed to be. The call from Prague seemed to mark a turning point, not just in her trip, but in me. I had passed some unspoken test. I had proven I could handle the not-so-perfect parts of her adventure without panicking, without trying to swoop in and fix it. And in return, she shared even more freely. The photos that came next were different. There was one of her and Mark, sitting on a blanket in a park, looking rumpled and happy, sharing a loaf of bread and some cheese. The down day I'd suggested. Another was of her, alone, on a train, her head resting against the window, her expression pensive and a little sad. The caption read, "Missing you today." It was the most beautiful picture she'd ever sent me. It was real. She wasn't just sharing the highlights reel, she was sharing the whole story, the lonely moments and the quiet ones included. It made me feel closer to her than ever, as if I was right there in the train car with her, watching the countryside blow past. And then, the inevitable happened. It was a Tuesday morning, and the message that came through wasn't a photo, but a string of frantic texts. "Mom, my backpack was stolen. We were at a cafe, and I turned my back for 1 second. 1 second. My passport, my wallet, my camera, everything's gone." My blood ran cold. This was it, the big one, the disaster I had always feared, the one that played in my nightmares. For a single, heart-stopping moment, the old terror seized me, a visceral, paralyzing fear that screamed, "This is why. This is why you don't let them go." I could feel the "I told you so" forming on my lips, a bitter, useless pill, but I didn't let it out. I took a deep, shuddering breath, and I picked up the phone and called her. She answered on the first ring, her voice choked with tears and panic. "Mom, I'm so stupid. I'm so sorry." "Chloe, stop," I said, my voice firm but calm. "Listen to me. Are you safe? Is Mark with you?" "Yes, we're at the police station in Barcelona, but my passport, everything." "Okay," I said, my mind clicking into a practical, problem-solving mode I didn't even know I possessed. "The things are gone. That's done. We can't change it. Now we fix it.
First, the passport. You need to find the nearest U.S. embassy or consulate. Do you have your phone? Look it up right now. I heard her fumbling, her breath hitching. Okay, I found it. It's about a mile from here. Good. You and Mark go there, now. They will help you get an emergency passport. Do you have any other ID? A driver's license, a photocopy of anything? In my email, I scanned my passport before I left. Perfect. See? You were smart. You prepared for a contingency. Now money. I'm wiring you money right now. Don't argue with me. You need to be able to eat and get a place to stay. This is not a negotiation. I could hear her crying still, but it was different now. The hysterical edge was gone. It was the cry of someone who was overwhelmed but being led to solid ground. Okay, Mom. Okay. Thank you. Her voice was small, but steadier. Chloe, I said, my own voice softening, this is awful. It's scary and it's a huge hassle, but it is a story. This is the part of the adventure where you find out what you're made of. And I know exactly what you're made of. You are resilient and you are smart. You will handle this. Mark is there with you. You are not alone. There was a long silence on the other end, and then she whispered, I love you, Mom. I love you too, my brave girl. Now go. Get to the embassy. Call me the second you have news. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling, but my spirit was strangely steady. I had done it. When faced with the very scenario that had fueled a lifetime of fear, I had not crumbled. I had not used it as proof that the world was dangerous. I had become the calm in her storm. I had shown her that while I couldn't prevent the bad things from happening, I could absolutely be the port she could sail to when the seas got rough. And in doing so, I finally, fully set us both free.
The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of international phone calls, wire transfers, and logistical puzzles. But it was a whirlwind I navigated from a place of calm strength I never knew I had. Chloe and Mark, once the initial shock wore off, became a formidable team. She called me from the embassy, her voice tired but clear-headed, walking me through the steps. Mark handled finding them a new, secure place to stay and canceling all her credit cards. They were no longer just carefree travelers. They were problem solvers, and I was their steadfast mission control back home. There was no blame, no I told you so, just a shared focus on the solution. And in the middle of it all, a funny thing happened. Chloe sent a picture. It was of her and Mark sitting on the steps of the U.S. consulate, looking exhausted, holding up their paper coffee cups like trophies. The caption read, "World's worst vacation photo or the start of a really good story?" I laughed through my tears. She was going to be okay. More than okay. She was learning that the worst setbacks could become the best stories, the ones you tell for years, the ones that forge the strongest bonds. She got her emergency passport. The money I wired got them a clean, safe room for a few nights while they regrouped. They decided to slow down, to stay in Spain for the remainder of their trip instead of rushing on to Italy. We need to catch our breath, she told me on a video call, her face softer now, the panic completely gone. And honestly, Mom, I think we need to just be here for a minute. I could see the change in her. The frantic, must-see everything energy had been replaced by a quieter, more profound appreciation. They were no longer just checking places off a list. They were actually living in them. The day they were due to fly home arrived. This time, when I drove to the airport, my heart was a balloon of pure, unadulterated joy. I stood at the arrivals gate, watching the stream of weary travelers pour out. And then I saw them. Tanned, a little thinner, their backpacks looking even more worn and storied. Chloe's eyes scanned the crowd, found mine, and lit up. She dropped her bag right there and ran to me, throwing her arms around my neck in a hug so tight it squeezed the air from my lungs. I held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, sunshine and airplane air, and her. "Welcome home, my adventurer," I whispered into her hair. That first night, she didn't go back to her apartment. She came home to my house. We ordered pizza and she talked for hours, curled up on the sofa with a blanket. She didn't just tell me about the beautiful sights. She told me about the stolen backpack in vivid, dramatic detail, now able to laugh about the sheer absurdity of it. She told me about the fight with Mark in Prague and how they made up over the pastries he'd brought back. She told me about the quiet afternoon in a Spanish village where they didn't do anything at all, and it was the best day of the trip. I listened, truly listened, to all of it, the good, the bad, and the messy. And I realized this was the real journey, not the one across Europe, but the one that brought her back to me, not as a child, but as a fellow traveler who had stories to share with her mother, her friend. A few days later, she was over for dinner and she went to the freezer to get some ice. I was at the stove stirring a pot when I heard her go quiet. I turned around. She was standing there, the freezer door open, just staring inside. And then her smile, which had been so easy and bright since her return, just disappeared. It didn't fade, it vanished, replaced by a look of such profound, gut-wrenching understanding that I froze. Her eyes, wide and suddenly glassy with tears, moved from the contents of the freezer to my face. "Oh, Mom," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "You kept them." I didn't have to look to know what she was seeing. I had almost forgotten they were there, tucked away behind the ice cream and the frozen peas. The containers, not the pot roast ones, those were long gone. These were older. A stack of them, 5 of them, lined up neatly on the bottom shelf. Each one was dated in my handwriting on a piece of masking tape. The first one, from over a year ago, was labeled Chloe's birthday cake. The next, Christmas cookies. Then, just because brownies, and Easter lemon bars. The most recent one, from just a week before our big fight, was labeled Hope You Feel Better soup. I had made it for her when she had the flu. She'd taken a few spoonfuls and said she'd take the rest home, but she'd forgotten it. I'd meant to remind her, but then life had gotten in the way, and I just kept it. I watched her face crumple. It wasn't a sad cry. It was a wave of overwhelming realization, a dam breaking under the weight of a truth she had never let herself see before. She slowly reached in and pulled out the container of soup, holding it in her hands like a sacred, fragile thing. Her fingers traced the date on the tape. "All this time," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, her shoulders slumping under a weight only she could feel. "All this time, I thought your cooking, your constant feeding, was about control. I thought you were trying to manage my life, to keep me tied to you with pot roast and cookies." A tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "But it wasn't, was it? It was never about control." I shook my head slowly, my own eyes filling as I leaned against the counter, giving her the space to understand. "No, honey. It wasn't." She looked from the container in her hands back to my face, her expression one of heartbreaking clarity. "It was your language. This was how you talked. When you didn't have the words, or when you were afraid the words would come out wrong, you went to the kitchen. You made me soup. You baked me cookies. You kept them here, in your freezer, waiting for me, just in case I needed them." She let out a shaky, broken sob. "It was just love, wasn't it? The whole time, it was just love." And in that moment, in my kitchen that had witnessed so much life, so much pain, and so much healing, the last vestige of the wall between us dissolved into dust. She saw me. She finally saw the raw, unpolished truth of me. A woman who had loved her daughter with a ferocity that sometimes felt clumsy, a woman whose heart lived not just in her chest, but in her hands, in the meals she prepared, in the containers she saved, hoping against hope that her daughter would one day come home and be hungry. I walked over to her and gently took the container from her hands, placing it on the counter. Then I took her hands in mine. They were cold from the freezer. "It was always just love, Chloe," I said, my voice soft but sure. "I know it didn't always feel like it. I know I got it wrong. I was so afraid of your pain that I forgot to trust in your strength. But every single time I turned on that oven, every time I chopped an onion or stirred a pot, I was saying, I love you. I was saying, I'm here. I was saying, you are my home and this is yours. She fell into my arms then, and we held each other, two women who had traveled such a long, hard road to find each other again. We cried for all the misunderstandings, but we also cried for the profound, simple joy of being truly seen and loved anyway. When we finally pulled apart, she looked at the containers still in the freezer and then back at me, a new gentle smile touching her lips. "We should eat it," she said. "The soup. Let's heat it up. I'm actually a little hungry." So we did. We defrosted that forgotten soup and we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where so much silence had once lived, and we ate it together. It was just soup, but it was also a sacrament. It was the past understood. It was the present cherished. It was the future wide open and full of promise. And as I watched my daughter, my brave, beautiful, resilient daughter, lift a spoonful to her lips, I knew that every scar, every mistake, every frozen container of love had been worth it. We had found our way back to each other, not as the people we were, but as the people we were always meant to become, together.